Hey there, folks. Quinn here, Mask Ramen on the internet, and happy Saturday. This Saturday, I'm going to bring you the Jim Lee, Chris Claremont reunion. This is like their first time working together again after their X-Men stint. Chris Claremont introduces a bunch of characters here: Savant, Majestic, Soldier, Huntsman, which is co-created by Claremont, Tapestry as the villain, Soma as her sort of lapdog, and Grifter comes back. It was really exciting at the time. I remember this is like the team. This is the X-Men team. This is the OG. This is why I got into comics. Was Jim Lee. X-Men #2 was my first ever sort of comic that got me into comics. And Jim Lee leaving X-Men was sort of like a disappointment because X-Men was so great back then. But him starting Wildcats was immediately like my favorite book. Great artwork, great character designs. And in this reunion, they sort of throw it all away. Because the Wildcats proper, Spartan, Warblade, Maul, Emp, they take a back seat to all these new characters. And this is really focused more on Zealot and Voodoo here. Because Voodoo gets possessed again. Which is disappointing in a way, but I see what they were trying to do with her characterization here, because she was kind of like this, young, sort of hybrid alien coming into a world that she doesn't know, and, they've been trying to train her up so that she could defend herself, so she could be part of the team. But I feel like the initial sort of premise of the book changed since the first miniseries, because they were fighting aliens. They had this thousands of years war across the galaxies, and bringing two alien factions in the midst of human sort of they're trying to vie for the control of the world or whatever. That's all lost, and it hasn't really been cohesive in my opinion. But they're all great, all in its own. I have done reviews from 1 to 13. 13 is the final sort of issue that Jim Lee does, because he sort of goes on sabbatical, long-awaited sabbatical, according to his letter. But he never really came back as like a full penciler until years later, which I think was with Divine Right. But Wildcats sort of got taken over by James Robinson and Travis Charest. And those first Travis issues were good. Travis Charest was handpicked by Jim Lee to take over the Wildcats. I would have preferred if it was, at the time at least, would have preferred if it was Brett Booth. But Brett Booth was already hot, doing the Backlash, doing his thing. He did the issue 0, which is why I feel like it should have been him. But I'm glad it was Travis Charest. But this series, it's in retrospect, it wasn't the best series. It could have been more focused and better. But back to this sort of reunion here, a lot of characters, Spartan, Reno, Warblade, Maul, Amp, they all took a backseat. They were barely even in the book. And when they were in the book, they were sort of as sort of villains in a way, because they got possessed by Tapestry here. And introducing Tapestry as sort of this really cool, great designed villain, and having her and Zealot sort of almost mirror each other was cool. But there was a lot of information packed in here, a lot of new characters that was a little bit a struggle to to keep track of in some small way. It almost, like I said, it almost doesn't really feel like a Wildcats book, because the Wildcats themselves took a backseat to these sort of new characters that were just sort of like introduced but never really fleshed out, at least in here. They were just kind of showed up in there. And then the Huntsman, I remember I was thinking like, oh, that's going to be like a new Image book, but it never really was. But at this time, Wildcats 13, Wildstorm or Homage Studios, I forget where it was kind of going, but they had already so many great books like Stormwatch, Backlash, you know, they did the Kindred miniseries. Wetworks, I think, was already out and about, and Image kind of was already in full swing. So I didn't really mind that these sort of were not the best. They were, at the time, it was just like Jim Lee drew, I was happy. But this could have been a little bit better, more focused, and not like packed with so many new characters that you try to learn or just like are interested in. But overall, sort of like, at least for me, like this sort of marked almost the end of Wildcats for me. But I did continue on. For me, Wildcats sort of died off for me personally when sort of Alan Moore took them into space, and you know, where the war was over, and made them like just weird. Like, I don't know, I would just have like preferred if they were like working in the shadows, you know, trying to fight the Daemonites, but they like did that in the first 4 issues, which is weird. After the first 4 issues, like the Daemonites were kind of like not a thing anymore. Like that was like Hellspawn was like the top of that sort of era. I know Defile showed up in Stormwatch. I'm still sort of going through all that stuff, but you know, then they're still like learning the past of Emp, which like Wu here shows up, and you don't really know, he never shows up again. But you know, I really liked the Wildcats at the time when Jim Lee was doing it, and when Travis Charest was drawing it, and I still love the Wildcats, like the OG team, the OG designs, and I really look fondly back on these, reading them, but reading them sort of like as an adult now, whereas I read these as a teenager. I just feel like they could have been better, but back then, man, this was it. This was my jam, and I just wanted to talk about this reunion here, because you know, Claremont, after Claremont left the X-Men, it kind of disappeared, man. But he showed up here, and this was like an event. Yeah, it was okay. It was pretty good, and you know, I just want to talk about Wildcats. You know, this sort of reunion, Chris Claremont coming back into the fold, and back then I thought, oh, he's gonna come back. He's gonna be a part of Image. He's gonna be making all these cool books, but that never really manifested itself. And, you know, Wildcats, you know, looking back, was plagued. Well, all the Image books back then were sort of plagued, especially from, like, the original founders. They were plagued with late books and stuff like that, because they were running a business. They weren't just doing books. So I kind of get that. But at the time, it was like, yeah, when they came out, it was great. But you had to wait for these, you know. I don't even know, like, back then it was like, oh, you would expect an issue a month, but I think back then it wasn't quite that way. But yeah, go ahead and check out the Wildcats, man. The Wildcats are really cool. They also had a cartoon and action figures from Playmates. Really great characters, and Wildcats is still remains one of my favorites. Yeah. So I'm Ask Ramen. I'm also making my own comic book called Emergency Signal. Go ahead and check that out, and have a happy Saturday. God bless.